Hey guys, I'm the Comics Kid 2099, and I wanted to talk to you about a book that I read somewhat recently, The Iron Saint. If you read this as a miniseries before it was collected into trade, it was called Iron and Maiden. And the writer, Jason Rubin, he talks about this in the foreword of this book. Basically, the band Iron Maiden targeted this comic book and said, you can't call your comic book that, even though I agree with the writer of this book on this. The Iron Maiden was a torture device from like 100 years ago or more, and there's no reason why a band called after the torture device would then say that they own the name and that nothing else can call itself Iron Maiden. So I think that's kind of stupid. So if you read this and you're wondering who is the Iron Saint, there really is no saint in this book. It's just called that because they needed a different name because Iron and Maiden, they couldn't use that name, which in my opinion, Iron and Maiden is a little bit more of an apt description of this book. So, before I get into the review, this book is, like I said, written by Jason Rubin and drawn by Francis Manapul, and I'm going to read to you the premise of this book before I get into my review of it. Set in an alternate universe 1930s metropolis, a reformed hitman and an innocent debutante get caught in the middle of a three-way power struggle between the government, a religious sect, and an underworld criminal organization. Okay, so it says the government is involved in this three-way power struggle. Kind of, but not really. They are definitely the least developed section of this book. We see a cop, I don't even remember his name, a detective guy. He is continuously trying to target our main character, Michael Iron, but really he's not a big part of the book. Mainly it's the church and the mob are kind of gunning for each other. And we're not exactly told that it's the Catholic Church, but if you look at it, it's the Catholic Church. And again, we're not exactly told that it's the mob, but if you look at it, it's the mob. They have different names. I don't remember what they're called. I think one of them is the Syndicate, and one of them is something else. But they have these weird names. Basically, it's the Catholic Church versus the mob. And this book, on the back of the cover here, it says that Michael Iron is a reformed hitman. And that's kind of erroneous. He is not really a reformed hitman. One of my big problems with this book is that all of the characters here are very flat and one-dimensional. None of them are very interesting at all. Some of them aren't even, it would be generous to call them flat and one-dimensional because they don't even get very, very basic character motivations or anything like that, character descriptions, anything. For example, Michael Iron, the main character, when he starts off, he is a scumbag. He's working for the mob and he assassinates people. He will go into the church to deliver a message, which in that case doesn't actually mean that he's killing someone. He's literally just delivering a message, but he has to do so with extreme force. And then when he comes out and there's like 50 cops surrounding the church that he's in, and then he kills all these cops when he's trying to escape. And we are told that he's on some sort of steroid that makes him as strong as 5 men and have the endurance of 5 men and stuff like that. And I'm thinking, okay, if this is supposed to be our protagonist, if he is supposed to be a sympathetic character, which the book does try to make him a sympathetic character later on, if he is supposed to be those things, then this really needs to not have him brutally execute 50 cops when he's trying to escape from the scene of a crime. And if we are told that he has the strength of 5 men and the endurance of 5 men, then surely he can get away from this crime scene without murdering so many people, without literally ripping someone's jaw out. And he does something like that. And the thing is, this book wants me to think that he is a noble bad boy. And really he's not. He's a bad guy. He's not a bad boy. He's just a bad person. And then because he is betrayed by someone else in the mob, this book suddenly wants me to think that he's a good guy. He's going out and he's trying to get revenge on the people who wronged him, but I don't really get the feeling that he's suddenly turned his life around. If you look at something like the Iron Man movie, where Tony Stark was not a really bad guy, but he wasn't a good guy either. He was kind of just morally gray. He didn't really have any morals at all. And you look at that movie, and then something happens to him, and you see a clear point where his life changes, and he starts trying to be a better person. And I'm not even the world's biggest fan of the Iron Man movie, but that movie does it right. It takes a character who is morally kind of a scumbag, but he's also not so bad that it would be impossible to see him become a better person over the course of a movie. This book it's really impossible for me to imagine Michael Iron as a good guy. And frankly, he's really not a good guy. He's out trying to get revenge, and just because he didn't want to murder someone who ends up getting murdered in front of him, that doesn't make him a good guy. That just means that he didn't want to murder one particular person. But then he's freely able to go and murder like 50 cops, and he doesn't have any compunctions about that, even though those guys were just guys doing their jobs. You've also got this lady here who is somehow even less of a character than Michael Iron. He goes to her father's house to collect some money that he owes the mob. And he goes there with two other mob guys. And then when they go there, one of the mob guys kills her entire family, tries to kill her, and then tries to murder this guy. And then he blames the whole thing on Michael Iron, the protagonist of this book, and he says that the father killed Michael right after he killed everyone else. And then he takes the money for himself, and then Michael Iron is kind of outed from the mob, and everyone thinks that he stole this money, except that no one actually believes that. The main guy who's in charge of the mob, he knows that Michael Iron didn't do this, but for some reason, he's very willing to let all of this be pinned on him anyway, and it doesn't make any sense because the mob godfather guy, he doesn't have any character motivations. For no real reason at all, he just suddenly turns on Michael, who is very loyal to him. And it's one of those things. This book would work a lot better if characters had just a little bit of dimension. I get that mobsters are supposed to be really bad, but I'd kind of like to know why the Godfather guy doesn't like Michael, why he suddenly is very okay with this other guy betraying Michael, and then this guy sends all of the mob after Michael. Why? Getting back to this girl, she survives and Michael survives, just barely though, specifically him, just barely. And this Hans Zarkov guy, who's basically just the wacky old man scientist guy, he gives Michael a cybernetic arm, because apparently when you get shot like 5 or 6 times in the chest, the impact mainly just affects your arm, and so you have to get a cybernetic arm for reasons. And when he wakes up in a coma, as he's waking up in a coma, this chick is kissing him. Why? I don't know. All she knows about this guy is that he came to her house with a gun, he kicked down her door, and he was there to collect money from her father. Now, she knows that he did not kill her father, but for some reason, she has fallen in love with him while he's in a coma. Again, some character motivations would be really good. And I get the feeling that Jason Rubin has no idea how to write a compelling, interesting, believable love story, and that's the main thing. One of the big things that I'm constantly complaining about in movies, TV shows, and comic books, everything, is that a love story does not feel believable. You have two characters who meet, and 20 minutes later they are in love, even though they know nothing about each other, and they really haven't had enough time to get to know each other. Case in point, these two right here. She literally knows nothing about this guy except that he's a mob hitman. That's all she knows about him, and she's kissing him while he's asleep. Why? Is this the Florence Nightingale thing where you fall in love with someone who's kind of helpless and you're taking care of them and nursing them back to health? I don't know. The book doesn't tell us that. If it is, I'd kind of like some explanation. Why does she fall in love with him? This book, I will say, the reason that I bought it, because you may be wondering, why did you buy this if it's so awful? The reason that I got this was because, actually I think I may have gotten it as a gift, but I had expressed interest in the book before that. The reason I got it was, I was interested in it conceptually. It's set in the 1930s, and you've got a lot of cybernetic stuff, kind of anachronisms that don't belong in the 1930s, like flying cars and robot arms, stuff like that. Very interesting stuff, kind of a futuristic retro story. Very interesting, something that I would have really enjoyed if the story here was really good, if the characters were really believable and felt more three-dimensional. But the problem is, the story isn't very good. The characters are not three-dimensional. Basically, if I had to describe this book, this is a dumb action movie as a comic book. That's what it is. It really, there's nothing redeemable about this. If you're wondering about the art is okay. At times it feels very much kind of in the style of the Image Comics house style, which I've talked about that before, how all of the big guys who founded Image Comics kind of have a similar style. You have something like this girl right here, that looks like it was drawn by one of the guys who founded Image Comics. Not really very good at all, kind of anatomically just all over the place, just in general not very good. And then at times it feels a lot more cartoony, and at those times I like it a lot more. But overall, the art is just kind of there. I have to hope that Francis Manapul is a lot better on The Flash than he is here. And Jason Rubin, after reading this, I'm very willing to say that I am never going to read anything by him again. If I see that he's worked on anything else, if it looks just a little bit interesting and then I see that he wrote it, I'm just going to avoid it, because this is astoundingly bad. I literally don't think I can say that there's anything redeemable about it, and that's really awful, because usually even something that's just abundantly bad, I can at least find one thing that I enjoyed about it. But this book, the whole time I was reading it, I was just like, okay, when is this supposed to get good? And it never does. That's all I have to say about this book. I know I was very harsh on this book. I usually try to find something nice to say about the stuff that I read, but in this case, I just don't think that I can. That's all I have to say. I hope that you guys enjoyed this review, and I hope that you will, if you did, I hope you will like, share, comment, and subscribe, and I will talk to you guys later in the week. I've got one more review that I will be doing for certain, and then I'm not really sure what else I'll be doing this week. So I will see you guys later in the week. Hope you have a great day. Catch you later.